Thank you, Steve. Wonderful, inspirational, helpful. So, this morning I'd like to make a confession. It's kind of a Catholic thing. Share a sermon, shorten, teach a refrain, answer a riddle, start a movement, make a choice. All in about 10 minutes. So. First, make a confession. I got an email from Marion. I didn't read it. I was on vacation and came back and said, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to speak here. So I had lots of excuses, 4 funerals waiting to be planned and a parish council meeting and a few sloppy excuses like my laundry and clean the house. What was holding me back? I'd just been to Cincinnati, shopping, the things I didn't need, going to a wedding that spent too much, eating at fancy restaurants. I'm not the one to speak on poverty. I own my home. I have a job. I have benefits. I can retire. I'm not the one to speak on poverty. I was raised in a comfortable and safe environment. I was affirmed and loved. I got a full education. I'm not the one to speak on poverty. I stand here, as Steve said, a privileged person, as perhaps many of us here. I've not earned all that has come my way. I had nothing to say about the family I was born into, the community, the religion, the socioeconomic circle that I was surrounded by. I can join John Hassler, author, who said, I had the great good fortune of being reared into a cocoon of goodness. I'm not the one to speak on poverty. But as I looked at the outline, it said, speak on responsibility. I can, maybe. Again, must. So, we'll slide into a sermon. One that perhaps you've all heard about the preacher who was giving the sermon and said, all of you out there who have 2 houses, give one to your neighbor who has no house. And the person in the front pew, yes, sir, yes, amen. And the preacher went on and said, and if you have 2 cars and your neighbor has none, give one of those cars to your neighbor. You only need one. And the person in the front pew was shouting, yes, amen, go for it. And the preacher went on and said, and if you have 2 shirts and your neighbor has none, give one of those shirts to your neighbor. And there was no response from the person in the front pew. And so the preacher said it louder and louder again, and still no response. And finally, he looked to this parishioner and said, where's your enthusiasm? And the parishioner said, I have 2 shirts. When will it touch me? That's my responsibility. How close does a person have to be before I will see them and respond? Sometimes I'm the point person when someone comes for assistance at our church. And I have to admit that I sometimes fight the resistance in my heart to help them, even though it's not my money even that I'm sharing with them or my gift cards. I'm judging. I don't think I get a job. How many times are they going to come back here? And I'm trying to transform my unfair anger at them to a zeal on their behalf. What are the circumstances that are keeping these folks in such desperate situations? What can I do to change that? What can we do to change those systems that keep them down, under, unnoticed, ignored? Do I have the courage and the fire in my belly to turn over the tables of oppression and injustice? Maybe it starts with a phone call, a letter, a conversation. And now a refrain. I came across a song recently. It's called God of the Hunger, God of the Hungry. And though I'm not a singer, I'm going to sing the last piece of it, and I made up the melody because I couldn't get the melody from you. The last line of the song says, help us know that they are you. Help us know that they are you. Help us know that they are you. The song goes that God of all the hungry millions, God who suffers with the poor, still our greed keeps us from sharing with the hungry at our door. All who thirst will thirst no longer when we do as you would do. May we care for all your people. Help us know that they are you. God who travels with the stranger, greeted by our apathy. Teach us to embrace all people. All can live with dignity. May we welcome your people. Help us know that they are you. God who brings the captive freedom, free our hearts to love anew. May we comfort all your people. Help us know that they are you. That's the one-on-one. So here's the answer to the riddle. You probably want to know what the riddle is. The riddle is, how can we be poor and rich at the same time? And the answer is, when we realize that we are radically indigent and radically gifted. What is the beam in my eye? The poverty in my life. The poverty of vision to see injustice, to see into the heart of a person, know their story. The poverty of compassion that I can't widen my circle beyond my little cocoon. To see the less lovable. Where is your poverty? And what is the treasure that God has given us to share with others, with the world? Stewardship demands a heart that is humble enough to know that all is gift. That we are the caretakers. We are our brothers and sisters, caretakers and caregivers. What have I, what have you, what have we done with the garden entrusted to us, says the poet Mikado. And then, shall we start a movement? You know, Jesus didn't start a political movement. I think he started a relational movement. He called people by name. He invited them. He lifted them. He gave them dignity. He shared all that he knew. He touched people. He looked them in the eye. He listened to them. He cried with them. He encouraged people to break down the barriers, to open up life, to change the injustices to the oppressed, to quit treating people without care and dignity. God sees into the heart and loves each person who has been lovingly created in God's image. If we take the time, as Jesus did, to really get to know a person, whether they are at the homeless shelter or they are in the state office, then we can't just say they're the poor, but they're Bruce and Agnes and Becky and John. And person by person and group by group and leader by leader, lives change, systems change, discipleship of equals, a family of believers, a community that cares. The forgotten, the marginalized, and the neglected, the children of God, equal in God's eyes, are restored the dignity that really is already theirs. We have to make that difference. And so it's time to make a choice. I've witnessed care beyond measure, and just hearing all the people as you stood up and said where you were from was so heartwarming, because you have made a choice. In our own community of faith, one small example we have called Helping Hands Ministry. It is one-to-one ministry, people to people. Somebody's volunteers provide temporary meals and rides and do errands. An email goes out for a need, and in an hour it's filled. Amazing. I don't do it. Other people do that. We have people here from the homeless shelters and from the food pantries, from Salvation Army, people helping with housing. The list goes on, living out Matthew 25, giving human flesh to those concerns. Often you've done that struggling against hardened hearts, and eyes that refuse to see, and ears that are deafened by greed and selfishness and ignorance. But the dignity and beauty of each person has pushed you and needs to push all of us on to forge ahead, to carry one another's burdens. You inspire me. So yesterday, a fellow came for assistance. And thanks to Miriam, who nudged me to think about all this a little more seriously, I went out and shook his hand and asked him his name, sat down, let's sit over here, tell me about yourself. He'd been there before, but I'd forgotten, and I had met with him. I won't forget him now. Told me his story, needed some help. We smiled and shook hands. One person at a time, one day at a time, one organization at a time. Emily Dickinson says, if I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease on life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. But we have to choose to live together to make life better for everybody. So, God of the hungry, the homeless, the imprisoned, God of systems that are broken and beg to be changed, help us know that there